Hi everyone, well today I'm reviewing a very popular camera lens, Canon's EF-S 18-200mm IS. This is an EF-S lens, so it won't work on Canon's expensive full-frame cameras like the 1D, 5D and 6D series, or Canon's film cameras, but it'll work on everything else like the 60D, 70D and 700D, and Canon's Rebel series. Basically, if your camera doesn't cost £1,000, this thing should work. This is a Superzoom lens. This means it has an enormous range from wide angle to telephoto, 18mm to 200. These lenses are always popular because they're more convenient than carrying lots of different lenses around all the time. The downside is that they don't offer the same picture quality as lenses with shorter zoom ranges, or prime lenses that don't zoom at all. Another problem with super zoom lenses is that they're not very fast, they don't let in a lot of light. Their maximum apertures get darker and darker as you zoom in. Also, they don't give you a very blurry background compared to lenses with wide apertures, so you tend to get slightly flat pictures compared to other lenses. Well, that's the price you pay for convenience. Anyway, let's look at this lens specifically. Compared to other super zoom lenses, the build quality isn't too bad. It actually feels fairly solid. The zoom ring is very smooth and nice to use, which is useful for video making. However, it suffers from a lot of zoom creep between 100mm and 24mm, which can be annoying. Here you can see it falling and collapsing under its own weight. There is a switch at the bottom to lock the lens to 18mm, which is helpful. The focus ring is very loose, but that's fine by me, as it's quite precise. I used to own a Tamron 18-270mm VC lens, and trying to focus manually on that thing was a nightmare. This lens is much better, and as you can see here, pulling focus is quite easy when you're video making. The focal length changes a lot as you change focus though, which isn't exactly a selling point, but the footage is looking nice enough, I think. The autofocus is very fast, and although it doesn't use a USM motor, it's not too noisy, as you can hear here. The autofocus is very accurate and I'm really happy with how well it works. The image stabilization is pretty good on this lens. Here's some footage at 200mm without image stabilization, and now with the IS turned on. You can hear a gentle clicking sound in the background. So video makers should use an external microphone with this lens. The image isn't perfectly still, but the stabilization is nice and smooth as you pan around, which looks good on video. Now let's look at the picture quality. As usual, I'm testing this lens on my Canon 60D, which has an 18MP sensor. At 18mm with the aperture wide open at f3.5, the lens is averagely sharp in the middle, getting softer in the corners. As you can see on the bicycle, there's some heavy chromatic aberration too. Stop down to f5.6 and things do improve, especially here in the middle where the lens is now much sharper. Stop all the way down to f8 and there is good sharpness across the whole picture frame, although the chromatic aberration in the corners never quite goes away. Zoom into 50mm and the situation remains pretty much the same, with average sharpness in the middle and slight softness and chromatic aberration in the corners. Stop down to f8 and the quality in the corners picks up and sharpness in the center becomes very good. Zoomed into 135mm, we have the same story except things are generally slightly softer, and the maximum aperture is now f5.6, which is pretty slow really. Center sharpness is good enough, but the corners are pretty poor and the chromatic aberration remains strong. You have to stop down to about f11 to get a decent picture in the corners, but the center of the image looks very nice now. And finally, zooming all the way into 200mm. Once again, the center sharpness is okay and the corners are a bit poor. Stopping down to f8 brings a nice improvement, but the corners still aren't exactly great. The center sharpness again is pretty good. So in terms of sharpness, the lens is pretty average, neither great nor terrible. It's sharper than other super zoom lenses I've tried, but if you want a lens that will actually give you an 18 megapixel image, you should look elsewhere. Let's look at some specific image quality issues. Firstly, distortion. As you can see here, at 18mm, the lens exhibits major barrel distortion. One of my pet hates is barrel distortion, unless you're using a fisheye lens, of course. Zoom into 24mm and the barrel distortion goes away, but zooming into 35mm brings about strong pincushion distortion, which never goes away. You can see this in everyday pictures. Here you can see the barrel and pincushion distortion in all its out-of-control glory. Nice. Here you can see that the lens is handling bright light without too much loss of contrast, but some flaring is visible. The lens has a very good macro capability. It can focus down to 45 centimeters, which is really close and useful for all kinds of shots. The picture quality close up is fairly decent, but there is some colourful chromatic aberration. I think the bokeh, or quality of the background blur, is surprisingly nice on this lens. You can especially see it in this picture taken at 200mm. If we zoom in, you can also see the good center sharpness. So anyway, it's ages since I've used a super zoom lens, and they are quite fun to use. The Canon performed slightly better than I thought it would, but the simple fact remains, if you care about great picture quality, or if you want a wide aperture for really out of focus backgrounds, then no super zoom lens will ever make you happy. But this particular super zoom lens is a little better than most, and some people will be very happy with it.